talk about the Jews, but in particular we're going to talk about the beginning of them when they referred to as the Hebrews, or referred to as Israel. We're referring to them at the time they came out of Egypt. We're talking about the time that Moses is still with them. But we're going to show in this report that Yahweh, the Creator God, knew, knowing the end from the beginning, he knew that they would go off the rails and cease to become his people, and realize that they would go after other gods, and that they would not be worshipping him, the only Creator God to worship. It will be seen through this report that they were worshipping a dual deity, in other words, Baal in one hand and the Creator God in the other hand. It will be seen through the report that these people who came out of Egypt went back to worshipping the gods of Egypt. And if we do a study on that, we know that out of Ra, out of Horus, the sun god worship system, yes, they went back to that. And Yahweh tells Moses that he knows that they're going to do this. Now I'm reading from Deuteronomy chapter 31. This is the message from Yahweh talking to Moses. Yahweh said to Moses, "Behold, you will lie with your forefathers." He's telling Moses that he will die. "But these people will rise up and stray after the gods of the foreigners of other lands, in whose midst they are going to. And they will forsake me, and they will annul my covenant that I've sealed with them. My anger will flare against them on that day, and I will forsake them. And I will conceal my face from them, and they will become prey." We're talking about the spiritual world now, the spiritual people, the spiritual realm that gets into the minds of people and leads them down blind gullies. They will become prey, and many evils and distresses will encounter them. They will say on that day, "Is it not because my God is not in our midst that these evils have come upon us? But I will surely have concealed my face on that day because of all the evils that they did. They have turned to gods of others." Realize we're talking about a story, a report that was given to Moses. It's in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 31. But there's a lot more about what they did and who they worshipped. But we're going to find that if we go into Ezekiel, Rabbis, chapter 20. The Jewish people, or the Christian people, have always thought that the people of Israel that came out of Egypt were more or less being good people worshipping Yahweh God. You do know from the previous story that they worshipped the golden calf within 3 months at Mount Sinai. So it was in their minds all the time to worship foreign gods, pagan gods. Now this is what the prophet Ezekiel is saying. "Thus said Yahweh, Elohim, on that day I chose Israel. I raised my hand in an oath for the seed of the house of Jacob, and I made myself known to them in the land of Egypt. I raised my hand for them, saying, I am Yahweh your God. On that day I raised my hand for them, swearing to take them out from the land of Egypt to the land that I had sought out for them, a land that flows with milk and honey, splendor of the lands. And I said to them, every man cast away your detestable idols from your eyes. Do not defile yourself with the idols of Egypt, I am Yahweh your God. But they rebelled against me, and they did not want to listen to me. No man of them cast away their detestable idols from their eyes, and they did not forsake the idols of Egypt. So I had thought to pour out my wrath upon them, to spend my anger on them in the midst of the land of Egypt. But I acted for my name's sake. Well, you can understand that if he was seen as a God of such awesome power to deliver 2.5 million people out of Egypt, took them out into the desert and then killed them, he wouldn't be seen by the heavenly host, let alone the nations of the world later on, as a merciful, just, kind and loving God. So he says he acted for his name's sake, that it is not to be desecrated in the eyes of the nation in whose midst they were. Before those eyes I made myself known to them, promising them to take them out of the land of Egypt. So I took them out of the land of Egypt and brought them to the wilderness. I gave them my decrees and my laws. I made known to them through which, if a man fulfills them, he will live through them. We're not just talking about living for one life on this earth, we're talking about eternal life. I also gave them my Sabbath days, to be a sign between me and them, to know that I am Yahweh, who sanctifies them. But the house of Israel rebelled against me in the wilderness. They did not follow my decrees, and they spurned my laws, through which if a man fulfills them, he will live through them. And they desecrated my Sabbaths exceedingly. So I had thought to pour out my wrath upon them in the wilderness, to make an end of them there. That's how angry he was with them. But I acted for my name's sake, that it should not be desecrated in the eyes of the nations, before whose eyes I had taken them out of Egypt. I also raised my hand in an oath against them in the wilderness, not to bring them to the land that I had given them, a land that flowed with milk and honey, a splendour from all the lands. All this because they spurned my laws, and they did not follow my decrees, and they desecrated my Sabbaths. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy is the 4th commandment in the 10 commandments. Because their heart kept going after other idols. Yahweh said, but my eye pitied them, rather than destroying them, so I did not put an end to them in the wilderness. I said to their children in the wilderness, do not follow the practices of your fathers, and do not observe their laws, and do not defile yourself with their idols. I am Yahweh your God. Follow my decrees, and observe my laws, and fulfill them. Sanctify my Sabbaths, and they shall be a sign between me and you, for you to know that I am Yahweh your God. But the children rebelled against me. They did not follow my decrees, and they did not observe my laws to fulfill them, through which, if a man fulfills them, he will live through them. But they desecrated my Sabbath, so I spoke to myself to pour out my wrath upon them. He was very angry with them, to spend my anger on them in the wilderness. But I restrained my hand and acted for the sake of my holy name, Yahweh, that it not be desecrated in the eyes of the nations, before whose eyes I had delivered them out of Egypt. I also raised my hand in an oath against them in the wilderness, to scatter them amongst the nations, and to disperse them amongst the lands. Now you're going to read in Jeremiah and all through the Bible that Yahweh scattered them to all the nations, to the four corners of the earth, because of their wickedness. You're reading here a repeat that he'd made up his mind back at the beginning with Moses, that he would scatter them throughout the entire earth. Because they did not fulfill my laws, they spurned my decrees, and they desecrated my Sabbaths. And their eyes went after the idols of their fathers. So I too gave them decrees that were not good, and laws by which they could not live. I profaned them because of their gifts of passing every firstborn before Moloch. They were even sacrificing children, so that I might destroy them, so that they should know that I am Yahweh. Therefore speak to the house of Israel. Say to them, thus says Yahweh, your fathers blasphemed me further even than this, when they acted treacherously against me. I had brought them to the land that I had raised up my man in an oath to give to them, and they saw every high hill and every thick branched tree. They slaughtered their sacrifices there, and they offered their offerings of provocation there. They placed their satisfying aromas there, and poured out their libations there. When I said to them, what is this high place to which only you come? Yet it is called a high place up until this day. And you read all through the book that they were worshipping idol worship, the sun worship system. Ishtar, Ashtar, Inanna, and Tammuz, the son of God. Thus says Yahweh, do you defile yourselves in the manner of your fathers and go astray after their abominations? And by giving you gifts, by passing your children through the fire, you defile yourselves until all your idols to this day, should I relate to your inquiries, O house of Israel, as I live, the word of Yahweh, I swear that I will not relate to your inquiries. And you read with me in Jeremiah 7 and Jeremiah 23. He said, don't pray to me about these people. He had a gutful of them. As for what enters your mind, it shall not be. As for what you say, we will be like the nations around them, like the families of the lands, to worship wood and stone. As I live, the word of Yahweh, I swear that I will rule over you with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm and with outpoured wrath. Since when? Since the time of Moses. I will take you out from the nations and gather you from the lands to which you were scattered with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm and with an outpoured wrath. And I will bring you to the wilderness of the nations, and I will contend with you there face to face. Now, we go through the story, you'll see that they were taken captive in 721 BC, exiled into Assyria. Again, they were taken captive in 586 BC to Babylon. And again, you will read that they appointed themselves their own rabbis, who, again, you will find, that's where they concocted the so-called oral law, which is the Talmud today, which is part of the illegal document that Yahweh says, don't add to my words. I've given you all my words, don't add to them. But they didn't heed that warning. And that document, the Talmud that came through from Babylon and Egypt, is with the Orthodox Jews today. But he has in his heart to find a remnant within the people that are faithful, that he will choose, and that he will bring back to being his people at the land that he made a promise to give them. Listen to what he says now. Just as I contended with your forefathers in the wilderness of the land of Egypt, so will I contend with you, the word of Yahweh, Elohim. I will make you pass under the rod, and I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. I will separate from among you those who rebel separate those who rebel, and those who transgress against me. I will take them out of the land of their sojourning, but they will not come to the land that I promised the fathers. Then you will know that I am Yahweh. And you, O house of Israel, thus said Yahweh Elohim, let every man go serve his idols, since you do not listen to me, and do not profane my holy mountain, my holy name any longer, with your gifts and with your idols. Now he's brought forward and posted the prophecy of what he will do at the end of days, which we have shown you in the previous reports. He says, but on my holy mountain, on the mountain of the heights of Israel, the word of Yahweh Elohim, there the entire house of Israel, all of it, will serve me in my land. There I will accept them favourably, and there will I seek your tributes and the finest of your offerings with all of your consecrated things. Through a satisfying aroma I will accept you favourably when I remove you from the people, remove you from all of the people, the faithful ones, and gather you from the land where you were scattered, and I will be sanctified through you in the eyes of the nations. So when he calls his faithful ones, the chosen ones, out of all the nations, then all of the nations will realize who Yahweh is. Then you will know that I am Yahweh when I bring you to the soil of Israel, to the land about which I raised my hand in an oath to give to your forefathers. And there you will remember your ways, and you'll remember all the deeds by which you became defiled. And you will be disgusted with yourselves, you and all your evils that you have done. Then you will know that I am Yahweh, your God, when I act with you for my name's sake. He's very much guarding his holy name, Yahweh. And not in accord with your evil ways and your corrupt deeds, O house of Israel. The word of Yahweh has spoken. So you can see here, going back to Deuteronomy, he spoke to Moses. He knew they were going to go off the rails. We come forward roughly to 2,500, only 3,000 years later, when he's now making a statement, but I'll separate those who have rebelled against me, and I will choose the ones that are faithful to me, and they're the ones that I'm going to call forth. Yahweh God from the Creator had a plan right from the day of Moses, where you've just seen his report, right through to the end of days. Then if I just tell you, Abraham, it says by the sages, was born in 1948 after creation. Now again, I'm going to tell you, I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a pastor, I don't belong to any church, and I don't belong to any synagogue. But you can work all this out yourself if you read the book. So if Abraham was roughly from today, 3,800 years ago, it appears that Moses and Egypt, Exodus out of Egypt, delivering the people out of Egypt is roughly 3,400 years ago from today. Then if you come forward to David, King David, who was the first king over all of Israel and Judah, he is roughly 3,000 years ago from today. And then of course you've got the Babylon exile, 586 BC, which would bring us up to 2,500 years roughly today. Now I've rounded off the figures, and you can get exact figures if you want to take the time to do the details. But if they were exiled into Babylon 2,500 years ago, also realize in the report that I've given to you that by that time Yahweh had exiled all of the 10 tribes of Israel by the Assyrian army. That was 721 BC. So that's 2,700 odd years ago. But then you will read in the history books and the good books that he finally exiled them into Babylon 586 BC, which of course is roughly 2,500 years from us today. But you'll also realise that Yahweh said that they appointed themselves their own rabbis. They weren't speaking the truth. They were fake, they were false. And you'll also read in my reports that Yahweh said, I've had enough of them. Don't pray to me about them. I don't want to hear your prayers, and I will not hear your prayers, so don't entreat me for these people. That's through the prophets of Jeremiah and Isaiah, again roughly 500 BC. So there's your timeline of what we're looking at. And then of course you come all the way through from King David through to the last king, and you will see that not one single king of Israel kept the commandments of God. And you'll see only 5 kings of Judah kept the commandments of Yahweh God. None of the others kept the commandments of Yahweh God. And when you come all the way through to 1 AD, 1 BC, and the Pharisees, the Sadducees, and the Sanhedrin, what were they keeping, as you will see from these reports? They were also not being true and faithful to Yahweh, the Creator God. They were also, hand down from Babylon, the oral law, the Talmud, which came out of those rabbis, which were appointed by the people, but they were not speaking on behalf of Yahweh God. Out of their own mind, they concocted up the Talmud. So you bring that forward all the way now to the Jews that you've got today, and they will regard the Talmud more reverently than the Old Testament Bible, than the Torah. So there's an example of the timeline, and there's a bit of an example of the summary of what we're talking about. And I'll give you a couple of the reports that Yahweh said, I've had enough 7. Don't call on me. This is one of the final warnings that Yahweh God gave to the people that were left. And he says to Jeremiah, these are his words, quote, verse 27, you will tell them all these things, Jeremiah, but they won't listen to you. You will call out to them, but they will not answer to you. They will not listen. This is a nation that would not listen to the voice of Yahweh, and they would not accept rebuke. Faith is lost. It is detached from their speech. First of all, I'm going to tell you that in verse 19 of the chapter, Yahweh makes these words. He says, it will be in the end of days that you will have an understanding of this message. When? At the end of days. So obviously 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years ago, none of the theologians, rabbis, Christians, or anybody were not to understand it, because Yahweh says you won't understand it. And his words say, quote, it will be in the end of days that you will have an understanding. Now if you look at verse 25, I have heard what is said by the prophets who prophesy falsely in my name. Yahweh speaking. They say, I've had a dream, I've had a dream, I've had a vision. How long? Is anything in the heart of the prophets who prophesy falsehood? They prophesy or preach their heart's deceit. These are the rabbis that were self-appointed, who think to make my people forget my name. Now all through the Bibles today you have the word Lord replacing the tetragrammaton or the word Yahweh. In the Jewish writings you'll have the word Hashem. Hashem is the conglomeration of a name cooked up by the Talmud, by the Jews. They will not call out on and utter and speak the name of Yahweh. They have dreams and they tell to each other, just as their fathers forgot my name through their worship of Baal. There's one of the final warnings, and that is what came out of the fake rabbis, the false rabbis that were in Babylon and Egypt. And then, of course, later in Jerusalem, there is a promise that he's going to call Israel back. Now, everybody thinks that the Israel that was going to be called back happened in 1948, and they're the Jews today. No, they're not, because he makes it quite clear here. The only ones that he's going to refer to as Israel are those that are faithful to him, keeping his laws. He goes and says here, therefore the days are coming, the word of Yahweh, when people will no longer say, no longer swear, Yahweh lives, who brought the children of Israel up from the land of Egypt. Rather, they'll say, as Yahweh lives, who brought up and brought back the house of Israel from the land of the north, and from all of the lands wherein over the earth that he has dispersed them. And then they will dwell in their own land. So there's a promise that he's still going to bring Israel back. But you've got to realise, the old Israel, as you've seen in my reports and from the good book, they were totally rejected by the hand of Yahweh. And you will see here that the new group of people referred to as Israel, you don't know who they are. I don't. They're chosen by the hand of Yahweh God only. And they're the ones that he refers to in the same report that he will bring back to the land. If you seek me with all your heart and your mind and your soul, I will hear you and I will protect you. And I shall grant them the heart to know me, that I am Yahweh, and they will be a people unto me, and I shall be a God for them, for they will return to me with their heart. So there is a chance for the people that want to be in the kingdom of Yahweh, according to this book. If you go to chapter 30 and 31, it's referring to the new covenant, and it's referring to the new group of people called Israel that he's going to save. But as I've said in my previous report, you have to read chapter 29 before you read 30 and 31, and you'll realise that it's a letter. And you can't rip out one whole chapter out of a letter and expect to understand it fully. But I'll quote the last part, or the first part in chapter 30. Woe, for that day will be momentous, there is nothing like it. It will be the time of trouble for Jacob. It'll be the time of trouble for Israel. But they will be saved from it. And it shall be on that day, the word of Yahweh, that I will break off the yoke of the conqueror from your neck. I will tear your straps, and foreigners will no longer enslave the people. And they will serve Yahweh their God, and David their king, whom he says I will appoint again to be over the people. I am saving you from distant places, your descendants from the land of captivity. Israel will return and be at peace and tranquil. No one will make Israel afraid again. For I'm with you, he says. Well, if you think that they're living in tranquil without fear since they came back in 1948, think again. Because, well, you haven't got the time of this report, but it tells you that in the last days, Jerusalem and Damascus will be flattened in the war that is pending right now. It says here, for I am with you, those that are faithful, to save you. For I will bring annihilation upon all of the nations in the earth, among whom I have dispersed you. But upon you I will not bring annihilation. I will chastise you with justice, but I will never eliminate you completely. So you have a promise here that there is a group of people referred to as the new Israel group of people. This has got nothing to do with the land called Israel today, and it's got nothing to do with the Jews that over there saying that they were delivered back to their land in 1948. As a matter of fact, most of those people over there came out of Khazaria. Look it up. Khazarian. They're running around with little black caps and little black suits. This is not the Israel or the Hebrew people out of Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. And these people, it tells you here, his day of vengeance. His day of vengeance is not a day like 24 hours. I believe his day of vengeance started 20 years ago or more. But with what is happening throughout the world today, and it will get worse, the wars will increase. NATO, US, and the United Nations will wage war against all of the nations that they want to take total control of. But through this period of time, this is what Yahweh says about his faithful people. And we're talking about his plans that he had all the way back from the first part of this report, the plans that he had to save the world and save his people that he gave to Moses thousands of years ago. My plans will not recede until I have accomplished it, Yahweh speaking, and until he has upheld his plans of his heart. It will be end of the days, you will be able to understand it. Again, we are in the end of days, and it's not until now that a rabbi, a pastor, a theologian, a church or a synagogue could understand this. We are now at the time that Yahweh is lifting the veil over the eyes, over the people. He's lifting up the veil so that his faithful people will call out for him with their heart and their soul. At that time, Yahweh says, I will be a God for all of the families of the new Israel. You have a lot of doctrines running around the world that say that the Christians believe that they are the new Israel under the new covenant. You've got the people, the Jews that are over there in the land called Israel today saying that they are under the new covenant. I'll read a little bit to you about this. It's in Jeremiah 31, starting from about verse 30. Behold, the days are coming, Yahweh says, when I will seal a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah. It is not like the covenant that I sealed with their forefathers in the day that I took hold of their hand and brought them out of Egypt. So it's not the same as that covenant. Those people, those Israel, those Jews, they abrogated my covenant. Although I became their master, the word of Yahweh, for this is the covenant that I shall seal with the house of Israel after those days. And we're there. I will place my law within them, and I will write it into their hearts. I will be a God for them, and they will be a people for me. And they will no longer teach each other, because you see, as he says, I will put my law into their hearts, and they will be faithful. Report. They will follow. I'm not a rabbi, I'm not a pastor. I just read the old book. I believe in Yahweh God, the Creator. I've just read it from the book. You can read it yourself. You can come to your own conclusions. But I'll tell you something. The rabbis and the pastors won't like what you're telling them, that you've found this out. Because you see, they've had the false doctrines handed down to them for thousands of years. And they're convinced in their heart that what they believe is correct. But I can assure you, those that are not keeping his laws and faithful to Yahweh God, Yahweh God makes it very clear. He put it into the minds of the enemy to come up against them only to annihilate them. He did that with King Hezekiah. He killed 185,000 soldiers. He did that with the king of Egypt. He killed them all. He put it into the minds of the evil people that reject him and reject his law, such as NATO, United Nations, US, all the countries of the world who do not believe in the existence of God, who do not believe that Yahweh God would dish out and kill them. It also says, and I'll put it in the next report if we have time, that these NATO people, United Nations people, they've built cities underground called deep underground military bases. And I can tell you in this book, Yahweh says, I will seal them up in it. I will imprison them in their own prison when the time of wrath falls, when the time of his judgment happens. They think they've got all of the technology to destroy anybody, take control of the world. They're going to learn the same lesson as the king of Egypt did and the king of Assyria did.